Hello, people. Back again with another interesting conversation. The shadow of Alexander, the Ptolemies. Let's get into it.
Very Greek in conception. He wanted open, people coming in, people going out. And it was perfect. It was ideal. You know, you had the Pharos Island outside the port, and the Pharos Island was connected to the port. There was a kind of bisecting breakwater built up. So you really had two harbors in Alexandria, and supposedly each one could hold 1,200 ships. Right? So this is a big harbor, and it worked well. But this Pharos lighthouse is going to guide the ships in, and it could be seen 30 miles out. That's an amazing thing in ancient times. Now we're told that there was a fire kept, an intentional fire that was kept burning permanently. That's the source of the beacon. There was a fire kept burning permanently on the upper level, 24 hours a day, and the light was reflected by a huge bronze mirror, which could be slid on a groove, right? So it could kind of rotate almost and direct the light outward about 180 degrees. This was a wonderful invention. The lighthouse remained intact, pretty much intact. There were a couple of earthquakes that really damaged it, but it was just about functioning up until 1303, I think it is. 1303, when an earthquake pretty much demolished it. A little bit after that earthquake, an Egyptian traveler, Ibn Battuta, great world traveler, stopped and saw the lighthouse and said he couldn't climb up to in it. It was too damaged. So we know that into the Middle Ages, 1303, it was just about functioning. Quite a structure. Today, if you want to see some of the blocks of the Lighthouse of Alexandria, now, of course, with earthquakes, it's going to fall into the sea, things are going to happen like that. If you want to see some of the blocks, go to Alexandria, and out on Pharos Island, you will see a fort, built by Kite Bey, one of the Mamluks. And that fort is built on the base of the ancient lighthouse, and many of the blocks were reused in the fort at Kite Bey. So you should really look at it. It's really quite something. Recently, by the way, excavations, and by excavations I'm going to talk about underwater excavations, have turned up some of those blocks. You know, by looking in Alexandria Harbor, you can see an awful lot of those huge blocks that have crumbled. So it's quite interesting. Quite an interesting monument. But this is Ptolemy the First. He is a public works man. Library, Pharos Lighthouse. He's doing good things. He also starts building Egyptian temples. Right? They're going to be a little different. The relationship now between the Ptolemies and the priests is going to be quite different. Quite different. The Ptolemies will support the priests, but not for religious reasons. Ptolemies, I get the feeling, really couldn't care less about Egyptian religion. They're going to use it to their benefit. Now, the priests are, of course, the educated class. They are the ones who can read and write. They are going to be used as the administrators. They are a ready-made bureaucratic network that the Ptolemies can use for trade. And remember, the Ptolemies are coming into Egypt, and they're going to run it like a business. They are going to extract as much money as they can. Right? So what we're going to get under the Ptolemies, many of them, we're going to get heavy taxation. 10% of all land sales goes to the Ptolemies. They got a cut of virtually every business. They had monopolies on all kinds of things. For example, the Ptolemies had the monopoly on papyrus, which was a big trade item. Egypt exported papyrus. They also got taxes on emeralds, right? Remember way back I said that the Egyptians didn't have any precious stones? Emeralds are discovered late in Egyptian history. By the Red Sea, there are emerald mines. It became lost and was found in the 1820s, rediscovered in the 1820s, the lost emerald mines of Egypt. They're low-grade emeralds. They're nothing wonderful. It's not going to be mined again. But in the time of the Ptolemies, they were mining emeralds. And the Ptolemies were using prisoners. Terrible job in these mines. These men were really, really abused. But they're using prisoners to mine emeralds. Also gold is mined by prisoners. Right? They're putting them to work. Now, one of the things that Egypt always produced, if you'll remember, was grain, excess grain. They had more crops than they needed to feed their population. And that's what's going out of Alexandria port. That is what's going outwards so other things can come in. That is the big source of Egypt's wealth still, and the Ptolemies are benefiting. They are growing wealthy. Another thing that they had a monopoly on was banking. The Ptolemies controlled the flow of money. Any transaction, they got a little piece of. And one of the things that the Greeks introduced into Egypt, coinage. Before the Ptolemies, before Alexander the Great, there were no coins in Egypt. There was no money. It was a barter system. Now, one of the things that coins does, that money does, is it makes trade easier. You don't always have to figure out the deal. You know, in the old days, when the pharaoh would take his cut of the grain production, it was always in kind. You would be paid in grain, cattle. Same with the priests. Priests were paid in linen, things they needed. Workmen were paid in bread, beer, onions. These were kind of staples. These became the basics of trade barter. But now with...
Interesting. Very interesting. So the Greeks came up with the concept of currency instead of giving away your last good cow. You just give them some coinage, give them some currency, and that was that. You get to keep your cow. So that was a good thing. I personally think that was a good thing. But a lot of what they did has been exploited and is just, oh wow. Some people say money is the root of all evil. Other people say it's what you do with money that makes it evil. Evil intentions. So the Greeks were inspired by the Egyptians, where the Egyptians found something good and just stuck with it. The Greeks wanted to know how far can we go with this idea? How far can we advance this system? They damn near invented the concept of technology. I mean, shit. You going from one thing to another thing, but the principles are the same, but how you do it. Instead of paying with a cow or a sheep, you paying with currency. You still paying, but what you use to pay your debts is different. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the Greeks for doing that. But how, my guy? How is it that they created these things? And now these same peoples are in financial problems, having financial problems in the modern world. Y'all created it. Like, what? Everybody want to talk about how blacks ain't this, blacks ain't that. Let's dig into y'all family background. Y'all ain't doing so good either. And it ain't just y'all, it's a lot of peoples on the earth. They got some shortcomings. Anyway, let's get back to it.
The Ptolemies, it gets a lot easier. A lot easier. You can have across the country a standard price for grain, and you get a percentage of it. So the Ptolemies are really increasing business quite nicely in Egypt. It's going to be a business. Now, During the period of the library, Ptolemy has a history of Egypt written, right? It's written during the reign of Ptolemy I and II. This is, I've mentioned it once before, the history of Manetho. Manetho was an Egyptian priest who, like any up-and-coming Egyptian, learned Greek. That was the language you did commerce in. Remember, Ptolemy is never going to learn to speak Egyptian, nor will his descendants, except for Cleopatra. So he has other people doing this for him. Manetho writes a history of Egypt called Aegyptiaca. It's written in Greek, and the idea is that the Ptolemies can learn the glorious history of Egypt. And this is one of the books that's in the library at Alexandria. Okay? Now, in a sense, there were two Egypts. Right? Alexandria was a Greek city. Greek in feel, Greek in population. There were probably 300,000 Greeks living in Alexandria. 300,000. And the other population of Egypt was about 7 million Egyptians. Right? Mostly farmers with this bureaucratic priestly caste. Right? So you've got Alexandria, which is Greek, and it's called the city. That's how it was called. It was just the city. The rest was Egypt, right? And the Ptolemies are going to stay in Alexandria. They are not moving throughout Egypt. They didn't want to. They had all of the sort of palace pleasures that you could want. Why are they going to go south, right? Remember in Egyptian times, when we're way back in the dynastic period, that if somebody wanted to solidify his rule, you sent a family member, and she might become the adoratress of Amun, or you had a woman married to Amun and becomes the god's wife, or you sent your son down to Thebes to become the high priest of Amun. Ptolemies didn't do that. No way. You couldn't get one of them out of the palace. So they stayed in Alexandria, and this became the Greek city. And they exploited the Egyptians. There's no doubt about it. They exploited them. But we have Egypt divided, in a sense, ruled by this elite class and extracting anything they can out of the 7 million Egyptians. Now, but Ptolemy I, remember, please, did good things. Was not just this brutish, taxing people kind of guy. Library, the lighthouse, great things. He succeeded by Ptolemy II. That's easy to get, right? Ptolemy II, who continues the trend, right? One of the things he does is he goes to the area of the Fayum, which is in the north. It's in the north. And he reclaims land. He wants to increase grain production. So he's making the company even more efficient, right? He continues the library. This is going to be a family interest. And he also commissions the Septuagint, the Bible, right? Translated from the Hebrew into Greek, and it's called Septuagint by its supposedly 70 rabbis who were enlisted to do this, and they all did their translation, and it all came out the same. So he is interested in other people's learning. They're looking outward. And he marries his sister, going back to the ancient Egyptian way of doing things. Marries his sister, and this will be a tradition for the Ptolemies. So these first Ptolemies, Ptolemy I and II, they do great things. But unfortunately, their descendants aren't so wonderful. But we'll talk about them next time.
Wow. So, the name Cleopatra was used for the queens, the Greek queens of Egypt. Cleopatra was one of three. I still feel that the name Cleopatra might have been Egyptian, but the actual person, the actual queen, clearly she was from the family of Ptolemy. But with the Greeks adopting so many traditions of Egyptian culture, is it possible that they adopted the name Cleopatra from Egypt. I mean, it's not an uncommon practice to see a name or hear a name and like, oh, that sounds so beautiful. I'm gonna name my child that. You're not even from that culture, but yet you want to use that name. Okay, but do you even like the people? Do you like the people? I think a lot of African names that I hear sound nice. If it was under different circumstances, I probably would have had one. I'd rather have that one than my American name, but hey, I didn't have a choice in the matter, so it is what it is. Well, you know the drill. Comments, criticisms. Let's chat about this in the comments below. And I will talk to you later.